is that time of the week again where you, as is tradition at the Multifamily Collective, grab your favorite beverage. For me today, it is Free Reign Coffee. It is the Venom blend, or roast rather, and it is their highest quality caffeine. It's a medium roast. It's fantastic. I encourage you to grab a cup. Also, grab your favorite writing utensil and your favorite thing to write on because we have a fantastic episode for you today. Today, I am joined by Ted Meyers. He is the Senior Project Manager for Emerging Solutions at TheGuarantors, where he develops insurance products for multifamily owner-operators, emphasizing protecting net operating income and streamlining compliance. Since joining the company in 2022, he has overseen the expansion of Zero Gap Renters Insurance Program and led the integration of real-time coverage verification technology. Early in his career, Ted managed distributed engineering teams working on advertising and privacy projects at Meta and Instagram. He is also the co-founder and chief technology officer of Triad Vacation Rentals, a North Carolina short-term rental management company with 50 properties under management. This was a great conversation. If you are interested in renters insurance, in zero gap coverage, if you're interested in anything related to insurance, even captives. If you don't know what that is, tune into this episode because Ted does a wonderful job of defining what a captive is and then packing that for owner operators. So tune in, get your pencil or your pen or your electronic pen or pencil ready to take notes, and certainly grab your favorite beverage. Ted, welcome to the show.
Mike, it's great to be here. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, definitely. And I am interested and curious. Where are you coming from today?
I'm in New York. I'm in the Guarantors office. We are in One World Trade Center, the Freedom Tower, on the 84th floor. So thankfully, I don't have a fear of heights, but we're up here today.
Yeah, that might be a problem, right? Yeah,
absolutely.
Well, yeah, definitely. I appreciate you joining us today. I'm deeply interested in unpacking a little bit about the Guarantors. I want to start off by asking, you're a little bit different from our everyday guests here on the Multifamily Collective. You develop products for owners and operators. I'm wondering, how did you get there? And tell me a little bit about your background.
Yeah, absolutely, Mike. I'd love to. I started my career in consulting where I was actually working for Meta and Instagram. And so at Meta, I was working with some of their biggest ad spenders, think Walmart, to deliver a higher return on their ad spend with ultimately the goal of getting them to buy more ads. And then at Instagram, I was working with 50 product and engineering teams to really respond to a lot of the privacy regulations that were coming out a few years ago. You could think like GDPR in Europe, or the CCPA in California. And in those experiences, I really got that tech and product exposure. All the coolest guys I was working with and girls, they were product managers. And I became obsessed with that role and kind of diving into the product world. At the same time, on the side, I was actually doing some investment in real estate. And short-term rentals. So you can think like Airbnbs. And that was mostly in the mid-Atlantic, in North Carolina, where I went to school. And so at the same time, we and some investors, we built up a small portfolio of Airbnbs. And that convergence of real estate and product is ultimately what led me to the Guarantors. And so at the Guarantors, I'm leading our emerging solutions as a product manager. And really that means I'm speaking with our users, a wide range of users, everyone from operators, owners, site teams to tenants, prospects, the full gambit. And so really my goal is to understand those users' challenges, their needs, what they care about, and to build out solutions that really, meets their needs. And so I work with our engineering team and designers. We develop, digital products. In the Guarantors, we're focused on insurance products. And so I'm particularly focused on especially the owner-operator experience. Today, we'll be talking about renters insurance, but really building innovative solutions in that owner-renter space.
Got it. Talk to me a little bit about so what I hear you saying loudly and clearly is that you take a lot of feedback from the people who use the product, be it the owner operator and or the end user. And I'm just curious, those ecosystems that you employ, what does that look like? Are you sitting in a room with a bunch of consumers, or is that online stuff or survey stuff? I'm just curious.
I wish it was that easy. You could imagine like a two-way mirror and a focus group. But really, I'm out in the market, right? I'm at conferences. I'm on site with owners and operators. I'm in our sales calls. I'm listening to sales calls. I'm talking to our sales teams. And then on the renter side, we do interviews with renters, but that's really kind of getting scaled insights through our customer success team. So really looking at scaled feedback across our renters. What are they saying? What are they saying out in the, in the market on Reddit, at YouTube, TikTok? There's a million places, fortunately, this day and age where you can kind of get that information. It's not always as straightforward as just a one-to-one conversation, but really listening through the noise, through what they're saying to kind of get to the core foundation and kind of tying that back to my overarching understanding of a given industry or problem space.
Yeah, I think you're so right. It's like a fire hose of information. I've been reading a lot about feedback loops and the importance of the feedback loop, and sometimes lengthening the sort of time in that feedback loop, or sometimes compressing it in order to try to tease out I guess to your point, the signal in all of that noise sometimes. But appreciate you unpacking that a little bit. I think that brings us to an issue, or maybe we'll just take a hard pivot here, an issue which is a really big issue in this industry, and that is insurance premiums. And that really is across the board in multifamily. I see it from my perspective. I know people I talk with on a consistent basis are seeing the same sort of pressure. And I'm just wondering what you're hearing from operators on this topic.
Yeah, absolutely. The big line item, the property and casualty, it used to be that was predictable, that you could, when you're doing underwriting, pencil in a 2 to 3% annual increase on your P&C premiums. But that's just not the case anymore. In talking to operators, we're seeing double-digit premium increases,
Right.
up to even 20%, which is really just destroying bottom lines and the ability to predictably underwrite investments. Some carriers are even pulling out of states entirely. I mentioned California or Florida. These are really tough when it comes to insurance carriers. In fact, the other day I was speaking to an operator. He refuses to file claims below $250,000 on his P&C policy because he's afraid his carrier will drop him. And he'd rather deal with that $250,000 loss than have to go out, find a new carrier, maybe deal with 50+%, premium hike. So it's a real challenge out there. As an operator, there's so much that's out of your control.
That's right.
You can't stop a tenant from causing damage that might ultimately result in a claim, but you can ensure that you have adequate protection, adequate coverage in place. And that's really where we're at in the guarantors, is providing solutions to provide coverage in these instances that doesn't hit your bottom line, that doesn't cause rate hikes in your premiums.
Yeah, well, talk to us a little bit about that. You're sort of touching on renters insurance. Tell us what that has to do with P&C.
Absolutely. Renters insurance is a massive industry. It's $5 billion in the US every year. But even though it's such a big and developed industry, the processes around renters insurance are really legacy and founded in PDFs. And to expand on that, renters insurance is typically owned by site teams or leasing agents. That's not their primary job. Their job is to fill units with quality renters. And so this additional responsibility often slows down the leasing cycle, but at the same time, they're not adequately monitoring and verifying that insurance. And so renters typically provide a PDF of insurance. That could be fraudulent, that could be doctored. At the same time, renters are often canceling their policy. We've seen up to 40% of renters will actually cancel or let their policy lapse before the end of their lease. And operators are left to discover that coverage lapse at the point of an incident. So I'll tell, another story. Out in the Midwest, we were working with an operator who had a resident hang some clothes on a sprinkler, which is not the best place to hang it. That caused the sprinkler head to go off, and those things dump water. Flooded not only their unit, I think some neighbors' units, the unit below, a huge $100,000 plus, occurrence. When that property manager or site team goes to then investigate the issue, they're often left to discover that renter's, coverage is lapsed, and that's what happened in this case. And so, to more directly answer your question, that's a scenario where the operator would have to make a decision. Do I file a claim on my property and casualty, or do I eat the cost? And so our program is really designed to add that renter's insurance layer and ensure that layer exists to protect, when there is tenant caused damage, the need to file or make that hard choice of filing a claim on your, P&C or just eating the cost.
Got it. So unpack that a little bit for us. What does that look like tangibly for somebody sitting on site who, to your point, doesn't have time to manage that process? How do you make it more efficient for them?
Absolutely. I'll kind of tell a story first and then I'll directly answer it. But, let's say imagine you're that property manager, right? And you just got news, there's a huge flood. Oh man, I got to drive out to the property and check it out, right? As I'm going into that situation, my confidence and kind of how worried I am is directly related to the renter's insurance program that I have in place. And most properties have some level of program, but it's really going to then, influence how confident I am that we're covered. Let's imagine I just kind of have an ad hoc situation. Renters, like we kind of mentioned, renters insurance, they can get it. They do it. Yeah, you could show it to us. That's great. If that's the case, I'm not confident at all. I'm going in there. I'm like, we're not covered. This is going to be probably a massive claim. and we're going to have to determine, where to file this. Let's say, we have some kind of PDF-based compliance. We tell all the renters they have to get it. We check the PDF upon move-in, and then we kind of just forget about it. Maybe I'm hopeful, they have insurance. Maybe it's 50-50. We've seen 40% lapse, so I'm hopeful, but not fully confident. Finally, let's say I have a full zero gap program. In this case, I'm going to be 100% sure that that renter has coverage, because the zero gap program ensures that either that renter has their own coverage, or if they let it lapse or just never bought it, then we provided gap coverage. So that's really kind of the high level way of how this works. But we work with renters to provide them a number of options to get their own policy. And if they choose not to, fail to do so, or just ultimately let it lapse, then we're filling in backstop coverage.
That makes sense. And your program, is it right to imagine that it also is force placed on the front end? So not to suggest that people don't have options when they can choose renters insurance, but if they don't, then this is a force place option.
It's a force place, but honestly, many renters are choosing this because it's so convenient. And oftentimes it's about the same price, if in not some cases cheaper than getting your own policy. A renter's insurance policy will offer a little bit more coverage for the renter themselves. But if you're just really trying to check a box and meet, your operator, your landlord's requirement, then this requires no action. And so it's really the combination of providing choice for renters while still ensuring from the operator perspective that 100% coverage. That's really the magic of the product. And, to kind of even double click in there, there's many operators who say, hey, you could go buy any policy. That's great. Just send us the PDF. What we've actually built is a digital verification system. And so there's a few challenges in renters insurance. One of them, right, is just the verification up front. So instead of handing a PDF, renters come to our site, no site team or leasing agent requirement, involvement. They put in their credentials. So if you have a State Farm policy, you just put in your State Farm username and password, and then we actually make a digital connection to that policy. If you've ever used a service like Plaid for connecting your bank, it works exactly like that. And so the initial verification is super simple. You don't have to go to your provider, get a PDF, send it to someone. You just type in your credentials. We instantly verify it. Green check mark, you're good to go. And we'll send notice to the operator so that they can hand over your keys. So that's like a much more streamlined process. But the real magic of that digital verification comes on the ongoing monitoring. If I have a PDF, that doesn't really mean anything, the next day. It's just a static point in time check. We're using that digital connection to recurringly check in with that policy to make sure that it's still active. If we ever see that a policy was canceled, maybe lapsed due to non-payment, or in some cases people way jack down their coverage just to, reduce the price of the policy. If any of those things happens, we're instantly notified of it. We're going to notify the renter and the operator. And then most importantly, we're going to place gap coverage on that renter until they fix or get a new policy. And so that whole process is just much more streamlined, takes away a lot of work from the site team, and honestly creates a better renter experience because their options are really clear. It's really straightforward for how to provide proof of that coverage. And in many states, you actually have to legally allow renters to have options. So this kind of allows that perfect balance of providing options, but then forcing coverage, if the renter doesn't, live up to their end of the deal.
I have to tell you, just to endorse the renter's experience part of that, I moved into the home that I'm living in currently, and that forced place might be the wrong way to put it, but when that was presented to me as an option, and I did the compare and contrast between what I currently had for my car insurance and some boat insurance and other things that I had, the option that was put in front of me was actually a better scenario at a better price, and I was appreciative of that, right, as an option. So I think from a renter's experience point of view, fantastic. And I like from an owner's perspective and working in the property management industry, that ongoing monitoring. Because to your point, we just don't have time in the property management world to do that kind of thing on top of other things that we're doing at the property on a daily basis. So, talk to us about other options out there. Like captive is a word that I hear often in the multifamily space, and it seems more often as of late, let's say in the last 36 months, plus minus, maybe longer than that. But I'm curious, first, define what a captive is, and then sort of unpack that for us.
Absolutely. Well, to start with the similarities between, a zero gap renters insurance program and a captive, they are both aiming to manage risk and boost revenue. But really, when you look behind the scenes, there are different structures entirely. A captive is where an owner sets up their own insurance entity. So they're self-insuring. They're basically setting up a balance sheet, a pile of cash to then draw down from if there's an incident. And so that can generate significant ancillary revenue because there's no insurance partner that you're working with that's kind of taking a margin, but it's also very complex and very capital intensive, especially in the first few years. The most important thing about a captive is that you're on the hook for claims, right? So if you have a claim or a catastrophic loss, that's going to eat into your reserves, especially in those first few years when you're building up those reserves. That captive is in a really risky spot. Typically, captives are a good choice for larger operators. If you have less than 10, even 15,000 units, captives often don't make sense financially, especially because there are some management fees involved. So the bigger kind of your portfolio, the more you can kind of get out of a captive. Zero Gap, our master policy, on the other hand, is a lot simpler. We handle all the underwriting, all of the claims, so there's no real need to create a whole operational process and manage the captive, right? If you're creating your own insurance arm, you also have to deal with some of the insurance administration.
Sure.
But owners still can earn revenue on the Zero Gap master policy. So just like the captive, there are opportunities for operators to kind of, generate some revenue off of these policies. But really where Zero Gap stands out is we're going to be a lot more plug and play. We're not going to have any heavy lift. It's really cheap. Well, it's free to implement and very quick to implement. And especially for operators below that 10 to 15,000 mark, it's the obvious choice. Even for large operators that are strategically on the path to developing a captive, a Zero Gap master policy can be a really good way to build up a book of business to get policies in force in those first few years. That would protect you from a catastrophic event. You could file a claim on the policy. And then once you have 10, 20, 30,000 residents on that master policy, then you have a mature, stable captive that you can transition to.
Understood. Well, Ted, as we draw to a close here, are there any questions that I've not asked you that would yield some value for our viewers and our listeners?
Absolutely. I could go more into kind of other ways that I see owners and operators managing renters insurance. We see some pretty interesting solutions. Maybe interesting is a kind word. We see some really manual workarounds when it comes to renters insurance. One of the most common ways of doing this ongoing monitoring is what's called an interested party in the industry. An interested party is kind of like an additional insured, except you don't get any insurance rights. All you do is you get the right to be notified when that policy changes. What that often actually means is, one, ensuring that the renter lists you as an interested party, which can be a lot of back and forth on the front end. But then that carrier, Geico or State Farm, they're just going to send you snail mail whenever anything happens on that policy. Yeah. And so a scene I often come across is a stack of snail mail on some back office desk that represents unprocessed renters insurance updates, right? Our coverage starts at $9 a month. And so when you start looking at some of these portfolios, you can actually generate a pretty decent chunk of ancillary revenue. And so that's taken what used to be a cost and time sink, site teams having to deal with renters insurance, claims coming out of your pocket. If they don't have their own coverage on your property and casualty. And now it's actually a streamlined solution, putting time back to your site teams, and it's actually generating some ancillary revenue. And so we've really seen this as kind of, especially for operators who don't have a program in place, kind of a no-brainer for them to just say, yeah, please help us with this, take it off our hands. And, facing some things like these higher premiums, that's a huge deal to be able to kind of get, some cash back to your bottom.
That makes total sense. Ted, I'm a big fan. If listeners have any questions or they want to reach out and talk renters insurance or learn more about Zero Gap, where can they reach you?
Absolutely. As you can tell, I'm pretty passionate when it comes to insurance, when it comes to product, heck, even Airbnb or some of my personal interests. Always happy to talk. You can find me on LinkedIn, Ted Meyers. My email, ted.myers@TheGuarantors.com. Always happy to chat. So definitely welcome anyone watching to reach out. Would love to continue the conversation.
Ted, thank you. I really appreciate you investing some time with our Multifamily Collective audience today.
Absolutely, Mike. It's been a pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.